Hello, 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 beautiful and amazing people. Welcome to the Wealthy Trustee webinar. I'm super excited that you guys are here today. So tonight I have a short presentation for you guys where I want to explain the steps that you need to take in order to set up a trust entity, okay? So a lot of you guys have probably even like heard of trust or heard of some form of asset protection. And so I want to go step by step so that you guys can understand how to actually build generational wealth and how to transfer it efficiently and effectively. So my name is Christina Yvette. I'm the founder of Seven Ways to Wealth. We do have a program where we show people how to actually safeguard their assets. So without further ado, I'm going to just jump right into the short presentation. After the presentation, I am going to answer any and all questions that you guys might have. So during the presentation, if you have any questions, write it down so that after the presentation, I can answer them, okay? So let's get started. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see. There we go. All right, and you guys could hear me clearly. You guys could see me clearly. Yes? Okay, awesome, awesome. I hope that everyone on the call is doing well tonight. Thank you so much for being here once again. So, all right, well, we're gonna get started here. There we go. All right. So as I mentioned, I am Christine Yvette. I'm the founder of Seven Ways to Wealth. I'm young, I'm 35. I am a mother of three. I am a trust strategist. So I've been a trustee since 2015. I've also been a real estate investor since 2015. So the way that I actually got into real estate was by way of nursing. So I was a nurse for 8 years, but my second year into nursing, I was living check to check and I was extremely burnt out. And so I needed to find a second stream of income because living paycheck to paycheck is not fun. And at that time, I had a 1-year-old baby that I wasn't taken care of, to be honest. So he was being raised by my mom so that I could work 5, 6 days in the hospital, 12-hour shifts. And when I realized that I was spending more time in the hospital with my coworkers than I was at home taking care of my baby, I had so much frustration that that frustration fueled me into wanting to do research on how I could get a second stream of income so I didn't have to depend on the hospital and the paycheck. So I went to a seminar and I learned about real estate investing and how to flip houses. And immediately 6 months after I had went to that conference, I started flipping houses. And I got into mentorship, and my mentor, my first property, he's like, you need to put that property into a trust. And mind you, that was 10 years ago. I was 25. I didn't know nothing about nothing about nothing. So it was my first property, and I didn't know what a trust was. So I learned what a trust was. I set up a trust. I put that property into a trust because I didn't want anyone to be able to take it from me. Like that was going to be my livelihood for me to be able to take care of myself and my baby. And so I couldn't allow someone to easily snatch away what I worked so hard for. And a lot of us, like, we get into these transactions, we buy these assets, and we don't even know that anybody and everybody wants to take it from us. Why? Because that's the easiest come up. Why? Because we live in the United States of America, where this is one of the most sue-friendly countries. They want to sue you left and right. They want to take anything and everything from you because that's the easy way, right? Versus working hard for it. And so I wasn't going to allow that to happen because I had a baby to feed. So, with that being said, I put that property into a trust and I learned how to operate a trust. And I have been operating a trust ever since. All right. So, I'm just going to give you guys the steps that you need to take in order for you to get into that position. Okay. Now, my voice might be a little bit low. I'm used to talking fast and high pitch. because I'm just like recovering from laryngitis. So you might hear me clearing my throat a little bit, but the show must go on. So with that being said, let's talk about what a trust entity is, you guys, okay? So a trust, as we see on the screen, is an entity. It's a living, breathing entity, just like you. You are a living, breathing entity. So out here in society, you are seen as an entity, and the way that you operate yourself as an entity is using your name and your social security number. Okay, you got that ID number that tracks every single transaction that you get into. That's why everyone's asking you for your social. Okay, and so the same thing goes for the trust. So the trust is also a living, breathing entity as well. Okay, it is seen equivalent to how you are seen out here in society. So if you know that, know this, that a trust is going to operate with its name. So a trust is going to be named, and it's going to operate with an ID number as well. So it's a 9-digit number, which is an EIN, which is very similar to a social security. Okay. So now that we know that a trust is entity and that it can do anything and everything that we can do, which is a beautiful thing, that means that there's no limitations to what a trust can do. So if you can buy a house, a trust can buy a house. If you can build credit, a trust can build credit. If you can write a book tomorrow and sell it, a trust can write a book tomorrow and sell it. So there's no limitations, okay? So a trust is actually one of the most powerful entities in the entire world. So you can operate a trust in all of the countries, okay, which is beautiful. So now, how does this entity actually come into existence, right? We know how we came into existence, right? We were born, we were issued a birth certificate and a social, right? Well, with this trust, the way that it's born is by way of a contract. So it is what we call a contractual entity, okay? So there has to be a contract that is established and legalized in order for this trust to come into fruition, okay? In order for this entity to then be legalized and be able to be operated, okay? So now that we know that it's a contractual entity, with this contract, what you're going to do is there's several different parts to the contract, okay? But the one that I want you to know about right now is the declaration. In the declaration, this is where you're declaring what it is and what it is not. Why? Because there's hundreds of different types of contracts, right? And so what type of contract is this that you're creating, right? And so with this contract, you're going to put in the declaration that you are creating a trust entity and that you're not creating an LLC or a corporation or any of those other types of entities, okay? So now that we know that it is contract, let's talk about the different parties to a contract. You have the grantor. The grantor is the creator of the actual contract, okay? So other terms that you might see are settlor or trustor, okay? So with this type of entity, right? What happens is with the grantor, they're going to create the entity and then they are going to donate, right? So they're going to place their assets into the trust. Okay. Now this entity has to be created not only by the grantor but also by the trustee. So it's a two-party contract. Okay. So it takes two parties in order to create the actual contract for it to be fully executed. So that second party is the trustee. The trustee is a controller of the trust. So the trustee is what we call the fiduciary. Okay. So they are controlling the trust and all the assets that are inside of the trust. So they are going to be doing all of the operations for the trust. They're going to operate the trust on a day-to-day basis. Okay. So they'll do the hiring, the firing. They will control the trust funds. So there's so much that the trustee does, and they do it for the beneficiaries. Okay. So they're going to grow the assets that are inside of the trust for the beneficiaries. Okay. The grantor is going to create the trust for the benefit of somebody else, which is the beneficiaries. So we have the beneficiaries, which is the third party involved, which is the inheritor of the trust. Okay. So those are the individuals or entities that are going to be receiving the assets that are placed inside of the trust. Okay. So those assets are owned by the trust, but the beneficiaries get to receive benefits from those assets. So that's going to be in a form of distributions. Okay. They can receive annual gifts. They can receive distributions on a monthly, quarterly, or even annual basis. Okay. So let's continue on. So now that we understand the different parties involved in this contract, let's understand the different types of trust, okay? Remember, there are hundreds of different types of trust. So what I want to do is I want to break down a few categories so that you can better understand what every single trust will fall under certain categories, okay? So the first category that I want to explain to you guys is express versus implied. So an express trust is a written trust. That means that it is in the contract style. So it's on paper, it's on black and white. You can physically touch it, okay? Versus an implied trust. Implied trust means that it was done, orally. So it was a verbal contract that was initiated between those two parties. Okay. So there is no actual paper involved. It's not in writing. Okay. So it's your word versus my word. Okay. So, now the second one that I want to explain to you guys is simple versus complex. So a simple trust is shorter in nature, right? And so that means that it has less provisions or bylaws. And because it's shorter in nature and because it is simple, the trustees are required to distribute 100% of the trust funds. So everything that's inside of the trust has to go out, okay? And it goes out to the beneficiaries versus a complex trust. So a complex trust is longer in nature, which means that there's more rules, regulations, or provisions or bylaws, okay? And so, because it is more complex in nature, what happens is the trustees are not required to distribute 100% of the money. So, trust funds will be held inside of the trust and they can be used for other things outside of distributions. Okay. So, the next one that I want to tell you guys about is discretionary versus non discretionary. So a discretionary trust is where the trustee has full discretion to be able to make any types of decisions for the trust that is not embedded inside of the contract. Meaning that if it doesn't say anything, for example, about crypto, you are still able to go buy crypto for the trust, okay? Versus non-discretionary means that the trustee is not able to make those vital decisions for the trust if it's not inside of the actual contract, okay? So that is very, very important to note when you are deciding what type of trust you're actually going to create. The next one that I want to tell you guys about is statutory versus non-statutory, okay? So, with a statutory trust, every single state has its own laws. These laws are called state statutes and codes, okay? And so, with a statutory trust, that means that it has the state statutes and codes embedded inside of the trust contract. Because that is the case, that means that that trust has to be registered with the state, which means that it becomes a part of the public records. So if anyone is trying to look up that trust, they can find it on the public records and they're able to see the contents of the trust, okay? The other thing is that because it has the state statutes and codes embedded inside of the trust contract, that means that that trust is limited to where it can only be used in that one state. It cannot be used anywhere else outside of that state, okay? So that is what we call a statutory trust, and it has, a lot of limitations versus a non-statutory trust. So a non-statutory trust is where there are no state statutes or codes embedded inside of the contract. So that means that the contract is not required to be registered with any one particular state. And that means that you have the flexibility to be able to use that trust entity in all states. So that means you can use it in all 50 states and all of the US territories like Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, different places, okay? So the last category that I want to tell you guys about is revocable versus irrevocable. So, with a revocable trust, when we are referring to revocable versus irrevocable, we are referring to one party. The one party that we're referring to is the grantor. Okay, so with the grantor, what we're saying is that with a revocable trust, the grantor is able to revoke things. That means that they are able to, if they placed assets inside of the trust, they can revoke or take back those assets. They can revoke the trust, meaning that they can terminate the trust. They can make changes to the trust or process amendments with the trust. Okay. So typically, with a revocable trust, the grantor and the trustee are the same person, and the grantor is actually going to serve as the grantor, the trustee, and the beneficiary. So that individual is serving as all three parties, okay? And so because they're serving as all three parties, a revocable trust is actually seen as their alter ego. It's seen as them. It's seen as as an extension of them. And so with a revocable trust, it typically doesn't have its own EIN number. It's not seen as a separate entity. And so because that's the case, creditors that are going after the grantor or the trustee, which is typically the same person, can come after that trust. So unfortunately, your assets are not fully protected inside of a revocable trust, okay? And if that trust was to end up in court, then the judge will pierce through a revocable trust so that they can see the contents of the trust. They can see everything that's inside of the trust, okay? And if that happens, all court cases are public records. So then that revocable trust automatically becomes a part of the public records, which means that everyone can see the contents of the trust, what's inside of the trust, right? They can see who the beneficiaries are. They can see what assets that you have inside of the trust. So with a revocable trust, the only thing, because it doesn't protect you from because it doesn't give you full asset protection, the only thing that is truly beneficial for is avoiding probate. Okay, and so we'll talk about that in just a moment. Now, on the contrary to a revocable trust, you have an irrevocable trust. So, with an irrevocable trust, what we're saying is that the grantor has irrevocability. So, that means that the grantor cannot make any changes to the trust. They cannot terminate the trust. They cannot remove trustees or beneficiaries. And if they were to place assets into the trust, they cannot take those assets out of the trust. Okay. So, with that being said, what happens is with this type of trust, your assets are fully protected because the grantor and the trustee are two different people. They cannot be the same person. And they also cannot serve as the beneficiary. So the grantor cannot be the beneficiary or the trustee. Okay. So, with that being said, creditors do not come after an irrevocable trust, which means that your assets are fully protected. Now, if this type of trust was to end up in litigation, a judge will not pierce through an irrevocable trust, which means that your assets and the actual trust gets to remain private. Okay, so that means that it's not going to become a part of the public records. People are not going to know the contents of the trust, the assets that are inside of the trust, or who the beneficiaries are of that particular trust. Okay, so let's continue on. Now, how do we actually create a trust? Okay, let's talk about it. So, the first thing that you need to do is you need to determine what type of trust you actually want to create. Okay, so I just gave you a list of different categories that every single trust falls under. So, if you want to create a trust that's actually going to fully protect your assets, then you want to create what we call a bulletproof trust, right? And so, that bulletproof trust is a trust that falls under the following five categories. So the first thing is that it's an express trust. That means that it is in writing, it's in a contract, it's tangible, you can actually see it and feel it, okay? The second thing is that it's going to be fully discretionary. Okay, so that means that you're able to make decisions for that trust outside of what's inside of the contract. The next thing is going to be complex in nature. So that means that you're able to keep funds inside of the trust funds and you're not required to distribute those funds to the beneficiaries. The next thing is that it's going to be non-statutory, which means that you can operate this trust in all 50 states and all of the US territories, and you're not required to register it with the state so that it doesn't become a part of the public records. Okay, you want your trust to be private. That's the whole purpose. And the last thing is that you want it to be irrevocable in nature so that the assets are actually protected. Okay. You don't want to create a trust where you actually don't really have asset protection. Okay. So, with that being said, you need to, one, do your research, do your due diligence, and make sure what type of trust you actually want to create for yourself, for your business, for your family. Okay. The second thing is after you've determined the type of trust that you actually want to create, then you have to name the trust. Okay. And so when you go to name the trust, there's two things that I need you to understand. The first thing is that you are not going to name the trust after yourself. That is the biggest mistake that I see people make, and it is absolutely so frustrating, right? And so you have to understand that the reason why you are actually creating a trust is for privacy, okay? So that means that you do not want people to know that you're associated with the trust, right? You don't want people to know that you have some type of connection to those assets, okay? And so if your name is John Smith, you're not going to name the trust the John Smith Trust. That's the biggest mistake that people make. And so you don't want to make that type of mistake, okay? The second thing that you need to understand too is that you do not have to have the word trust in the actual name. So you can name it anything you want. You can name it, Rose Holdings, right? And that doesn't have the word trust in it and it doesn't have your name in it. So that is two words that you put together that are very distinct and unique, and they're not going to automatically come back to you. And people in society are not going to automatically know that it is a trust that you're operating, okay? Now, now that you have determined the name of the trust, then you have to appoint the different parties, okay? And so the first party is the grantor. So you have to determine if you are going to create a revocable trust, then you are the grantor. If you're going to create an irrevocable trust, then you do not want to be the grantor. You're going to appoint someone else to be the grantor so that you can appoint yourself to be the trustee since you can't be both, okay? So the next thing is to appoint the trustee, okay? And so the trustee, remember, is the person who's operating the trust on a day-to-day basis. And so you want to be able to have full control over the assets that are inside of the trust and over the trust funds. And so you want to appoint yourself in the trustee position so that you're able to maintain that control and you are able to hold that management position, okay? The next thing is the beneficiaries. So beneficiaries typically are your children or your next of kin or whoever you want to inherit those assets, okay? And then lastly is the successor trustee. So the successor trustee is the individual who's going to take over after you in the event that something happens to you, right? So meaning that in the event that you become incapacitated, in the event that you resign, or in the event that you transition, right? You expire, then you need someone who is going to pick up where you left off. That person is called the successor trustee. So they're literally going to take that position as trustee when you are step down or if you expire, okay? So you need to already have that person in place, and you need to already have that succession plan in order, okay? Because tomorrow is not promised. So after that, we're going to move on to step 3, which is you actually creating the agreement. So remember, you're establishing a contract. So it's time for you to actually create this contract. Now, one of the things that I want to point out is that one of the most important things are spendthrift provisions. So, spendthrift provisions are where you're going to put yourself in a position to where you're controlling the money from the grave. Okay. So, what does that actually mean? Well, remember, you have assets that you've placed inside of the trust and you have beneficiaries. These beneficiaries, they are called spendthrifts if they are going to basically blow the money, right? So unfortunately, we have individuals that, that they didn't grow the wealth, right? They didn't establish the wealth, but they want to spend all the money, right? On lavish vacations, on yachts and mansions and all this stuff, right? And so then the money is just dissipated. And so you need to be able to put spendthrift provisions in place, like what? Like what they can spend the money on, what they cannot spend the money on, right? Like they can't buy lottery tickets, right? They can't gamble, they can't do all these things, right? So you can put all those restrictions in place so that the trust has the opportunity for longevity and conservation. Okay. Now let's move on to number 4. Number 4, we are going to legalize the trust. And so the way that we do that is through the trust being notarized. So there's 2 signatures that are required. The first one is the grantor signature. The second one is the trustee signature. Those signatures are going to be witnessed by a notary public. Okay. That notary public is also going to sign, and they are going to place their seal on the contract That is what legalizes the contract. Now that the contract is legalized, you're able to start operating the contract. Okay. So the trust is now a legal entity that is fully executed and you're able to start using it. Okay. And so the first thing that you want to do when you are ready to start using the trust is you want to go ahead and open up that trust fund. Okay. And so that trust fund is a bank account where you're going to place funds that belong to the trust. Okay. And so what does that look like? Well, you can actually open up an account with any financial institution. So that could be a bank, a credit union, or even a brokerage. And the types of accounts that you can open up are checking account, savings account, money market accounts, and even cash management accounts. Okay. And then you're going to then fund this account with whatever the minimum is. So some financial institutions, their minimum is zero. Some are 500, some are 1,000. So it just depends on the financial institution that you decide that you want to establish banking relationships with. Okay. So now that you've decided to open up this bank account, what you're going to do is you're going to provide them with two pieces of vital information. So the first one is the certificate of trust. So the certificate of trust is proof of identity that the trust actually exists. Okay. So just like how you walk around with proof of identity, the trust also needs to walk around with proof of identity. So you walk around with a driver's license or state ID, and it's pretty much having a snapshot of who you are. Well, the certificate of trust is the same thing. So it has a snapshot of who the trust is. It has the name of the trust, who the grantor and trustees are, the EIN of the trust, the address of the trust, when the trust was established, things like that. Okay. The most important provision. And then you have your EIN confirmation letter. So it's very hard for you to get a bank account for a trust without an EIN. That EIN is issued with the IRS. Okay. And so those are the two things that are required for you to open up that bank account for the trust. And then the last thing is after you have established that trust fund, then you want to do the most important step. Now, the most important step is the step that I see people skip. And this is the biggest mistake that people make, which is they never actually transfer their assets legally into the trust. Okay. And so the way that you're going to do that is one, the trust has schedules. And so you're going to list the asset in the schedule. And then the second thing is that you legally have to transfer the asset into the trust. Okay. And so the way that you'll do that, for example, is real estate, right? And so a lot of us, our most important and most expensive asset is our primary residence, right? Where we live, our house, right? And so when you bought that property, they gave you a deed to the property. Okay. So you were issued some type of warranty deed. And with that warranty deed, what you have to do is you have to redeed that property into the trust. So you're going to then transfer the property from your name into the name of the trust. And then you're going to record that deed with the county recorder's office. So now the public records is going to be updated after the new deed is recorded to represent that the trust is the owner of the property. If you skip this step, then the trust is not the owner of the property and the asset is not protected. Okay. Which means that you then become what we call low hanging fruit to where someone can take that asset from you, which is not what you want. Okay. So now let's talk about asset protection, you guys. Okay. So, all right. So when it comes to asset protection, remember that's the number one reason why you actually want to put yourself in this position, why you actually want to establish a trust, right? Is for asset protection. The second reason should be for privacy, right? So what can a trust actually protect you from? It can protect you from bankruptcy, from divorce, from foreclosure, from heavy taxations, from lawsuits, and from probate. So, what I want to discuss is I'll quickly touch on lawsuits and probate. Okay. So, when it comes to lawsuits, right? Remember, we said at the beginning of the call that We're in the United States of America. It's a very Sioux-friendly country here, okay? So a lot of us, we are walking around thinking that we're not going to get sued, right? That's the last thing that's on our mind, literally. And in all actuality, everyone wants to sue you. Your brother, your sister, your neighbor, your best friend, your employer, your coworker, everyone, right? But we don't think this way. And so we never put ourselves in a position to protect our assets because we don't think we're going to get sued, right? And so, for example, right, a lot of us, for example, we are operating businesses, right? So let me ask you guys, how many entrepreneurs do we have on the call? Miss Yvette said her. All right, Miss Yvette. Who else? Zoom user. All right. So there's a couple of you guys who are entrepreneurs, right? And so a lot of us, we're operating LLCs, right? Because that's just one of the best entities. It's one of the most popular entities, right? And so my question to you is, with an LLC, what does that stand for? So come off mute. Somebody come off mute and let me know. What does LLC stand for?
Liability company.
Say that again.
Limited.
Limited liability company.
Yes, that's correct. Limited liability company. All right. Awesome. So now we are entrepreneurs and we are operating a limited liability company. So if you hear in the actual word of the LLC, right, in the actual name of the LLC, you hear the term limited liability. So if, right, Quantum said limited. So if the company has limited liability, let me ask you guys, who do you think has the other half of that limited liability? You guys could come off mute, let me know.
The business owner.
Okay, that's awesome. So, all right, so if the LLC has limited liability, then whoever owns the LLC has the other part of that liability, right? He said not awesome. So what we mean by that is a lot of us, we think that we are protected or that even our business is protected, right? And so unfortunately, a lot of us are the owners of our LLC. So what do you think is going to happen if your company is sued? Like Quantum said it. So, what do you think is going to happen if your company is sued, right? So, let's just say that you have a, hold on one second. Frozen. Hello?
I can see you.
Okay, perfect. I froze for a second. All right. So, what do you think is going to happen if somebody decides to sue that LLC?
Bye assets.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's talk about it, right? So let's just say you have a company, right? And you are selling candles online. And you go to sell some candles, and now a customer says, "Hey, half of my house burnt down because I lit your candle and my whole house lit on fire," right? And so you didn't know that that was going to happen, but at the end of the day, um what happened was that they were able to find out who the company owner is, right? Why? Because your LLC is a part of the public records, right? All they have to do is go down to the Secretary of State and they are able to see who the owner of the company is. And so now they know how to actually serve the company with a lawsuit. So they go and sue your company for $500,000 for the damages of their house, right? Due to this house fire. And so the judge is like, "Yep, it definitely was your candle." So what happens is now your company has a judgment for $500,000 and has lost this lawsuit, right? So now the company has to fulfill this judgment. What if the company doesn't have $500,000? What if the company can't fulfill this judgment, right? Then what happens is they can come after the owner. And so, how they're able to come after the owner is because that judge can actually decide to pierce through the corporate veil. And a lot of us, we think that the LLC is the end all be all, right? We think that we are fully protected with an LLC, but no, you just have a tiny little itty bitty bit of a protection there, right? A little tiny umbrella, right? And so what happens is the judge decides to pierce through that corporate veil and go after the authorized member of the LLC, which is you. And so if they go after the authorized member of the LLC, which is you, that means that now they can go after you personally for everything that you have in your name personally. So that means that they can garnish your bank accounts and all your names, right? They can garnish your retirement accounts. They can also garnish your wages, like your W-2 income if you have a job, right? They can go after everything. And then they can also seize all of your assets that you have in your personal name. So they can seize your house, your car, your boat, whatever it is that you have, they can seize everything, right? So you do not want that type of liability. You do not want for anyone to be able to knock on your door where you live, where your children live, to let you know that, that they're seizing your assets, right? So you have to protect yourself. So you do not want to be the owner of that LLC. Okay? So instead, what you're going to do is you're going to have a trust be the owner of the LLC. The trust is going to be what we call a holding company. So it's going to be operating as a holding company. All right. And the whole purpose of that is for it to own the LLC so that you are not fully liable for anything that happens to the LLC, but the trust will be liable. Okay. So that is how you can actually protect yourself personally if you are in business and if you're like a business owner or entrepreneur. Okay. So now that we know, let me head back to the slides real quick. Hold on. Okay. So now, the next thing that I want to talk about is probate. And so I have a question for you guys once again. So my question to you is, remember, we're saying that you have this primary residence, right? That is our largest asset, right? It is our house where we live with our spouse and our children, things of that nature. So if you have this primary residence that you live in and it's in your personal name, and you don't wake up tomorrow, how is that property going to be transferred to your children or your spouse or your next of kin? So somebody come off mute and let me know, please. How is that property going to be transferred? What's going to happen?
If you don't have a trust, it's going to go through probate.
Correct. It's going to go through probate. So basically, what you're telling me is that yes, it's going to go through the court system, which means that you're leaving it up to a judge. You're leaving it up to a judge that doesn't know you and that does not know your children. You're leaving it up to a judge for the judge to be able to make that decision if your children get that property. Not when, but if, honestly. And so a lot of us, we've bought into this lie, right? And so the lie that we've bought into is that my children are automatically going to receive my house, right? A lot of us, they're like, oh, I only have one child. right? I only have one son. So my son is automatically going to get my house. This is the biggest lie that we have bought into, okay? That we think that this is an automatic process when it is not, okay? And so what is the process that actually happens? Well, let's talk about it. So, if you if you have assets, so let's just say that you have many assets. You have a house, you have a car, and you have $500,000 in the bank, right? And all of this is in your personal name, right? So if you don't wake up tomorrow, then what happens is the state where you live, where you're a resident, they're going to create an estate for you. Okay. And they're going to call it the John Smith estate. Okay. And then they're going to transfer all of your assets into that estate. Okay. So at the end of the day, you're going to have an estate anyways. You're either going to let the state of Texas do it, or you're going to do it now during your lifetime while you're alive. Okay? So now that you know that you're automatically going to have an estate, right? You have to be proactive. You have to be able to put yourself in a position to where you're getting your affairs in order. Why? Because, right? We don't want to, to do a disservice to our family, because at that time, right, when we're transitioning, there's a lot of things that's happening, right? Our children are grieving. And so you don't want your children to have to fight in court to keep mom and dad's house. That's the last thing that you want, right? And a lot of people, they think that, oh, I have a will, so everything is good, right? A will is a wish list. Okay. A will, a lot of people think the will is the end all be all, and it is not. A will is a set of instructions that's going to be carried out in probate. So it is a wish list, right? It is not an entity. It can't own anything. It is just a legal instrument that they use in probate. Okay. Now, with the will, right? That is where you're literally saying, I wish my daughter will get my house. I wish my son will get my car and the cash money that I have in my Roth IRA. So that's what you're doing when you are establishing a will. Now, everything that's inside of a will, those provisions can go into your trust entity. Okay. Now, a trust is an actual entity. It can own everything, and it is the only way to avoid probate. Probate is inevitable. We're all going to go through probate unless we have a trust, unless we create our own estate now while we're living. And don't let the state of Georgia do it for you, or the state of Louisiana, or any of those other states do it for you, because they will, right? And so, what does that look like when they do it, right? So, if you did not have your affairs in order and they created your estate, then the first thing that happens is your estate automatically goes into probate. Okay. And now that it is in the probate process, what happens is it's going to be represented by a probate attorney. Okay, and it's going to be represented, it's going to go into the court system, right? So the first thing that the judge does is the judge is going to go ahead and pay off your debt. So whatever debt that you had. So now a lot of us, we don't even think about that, right? So what has happened or transpired during the end of life, right? And so during the end of life, right? A lot of us, we don't even think about the medical bills that we actually rack up, right? So you might have been sitting in the ICU for a week, right? You might have been in a nursing home or a rehabilitation center, right? And so there's so much things that has transpired. And so all of those creditors are going to go after your estate. Okay. You could have had student loans. You could have had credit card bills. You could have had any kind of loans, right? Or any type of, any type of creditors that you owe, right? Another one is like Medicare, Medicaid, like the state, they want their money back. Okay, so the state is actually going to come after your estate as well, because they want to be like, they want to make sure, hey, does this person owe us any money, because we want to be reimbursed, right? So you have all of those creditors that are going to come after your estate. And so the first thing that happens is the judge is going to go ahead and actually discharge all of that debt, right? So they're going to go ahead and pay off all your liabilities, okay? Now, if the money that you have inside of your checking account is enough, then they're going to pay it off, right? And then whatever is left over is what your children get, right? But if it's not enough, then they're going to start liquidating your assets. So that means that if you don't have enough in your account in order to pay off the ICU bills, then they're going to sell your house, right? And so you don't want to put yourself in that position, right? So now, remember, the first thing that happens is they pay off your liabilities. That after that, the probate attorney is going to take their fees, and then the probate court has fees. Okay, so all of this, right, all of these different organizations and agencies have already been taking from your estate. After all of those fees are taken out and all of that money is dispersed, whatever is left over is what your children get. So your children literally get the leftovers, which is absolutely frustrating because this whole entire probate process could have been avoided if you set up your estate now while you're living. Okay. And so now what I'm seeing is that our children are losing their inheritance. How many times have you heard it to where houses are being auctioned off by the county? How do you think they get those houses? Right? So some of them come through the probate process, right? And so you do not want for you to, like I said, be a disservice to your family and for you to leave them in that position, okay? So, like I said, this whole entire process is avoided. So now let's look at what it looks like when we avoid the probate process, right? So let's just say that you wanted to, get properly structured and get your affairs in order. If that's what you want, then you set up your trust estate. You went and transferred your assets. You transferred the house, you transferred the car, and you opened up a trust fund account, bank account, and you transferred the $500,000 in there. So now everything is under the trust, right? And you are the trustee. You're operating everything. You're making sure everything is good, right? Then you did not wake up tomorrow. If you don't wake up tomorrow, that's completely fine. Why? Because the trust still exists, right? And so when we set up these trusts, we set it up for 100 years, right? The trust is designed to outlive you, okay? So the trust still exists. That's one. So the trust is still going to be the owner of the house, the car, and the bank account. And your successor trustee, the person that you have listed as the individual that's going to take over after you if something happens to you, they literally pick up where you left off. So they go right into the trustee position and they continue to operate the trust on day one. Okay. And so your children, they get to grieve in peace. Everything remains intact, fully operational, and they receive their entire inheritance, right? And this whole entire probate process is avoided, right? You do not have to go through that whole entire process. And all of the debt that you had dies with you. Those companies and those creditors, they have to discharge that debt. Why? Because they have no estate to come after, because you didn't have anything in your personal name, and they can't come after your trust because you are not the trust and the trust is not you. So you have to understand this in order for you to make the right decisions, in order for you to actually truly transfer that wealth to the next generation. Because I will tell you, if you don't have a trust, then the wealth is not going to reach the next generation. Okay. So let's continue on with the slides and then we'll dive into Q&A. So next thing is, this is the wealth building formula, you guys. Okay, so I have three different pillars here. I have structure, I have credit, and I have invest. Okay, so when it comes to structure, right, we have three different types of trust that I recommend. When it comes to structure, you definitely want to have a for-profit and a nonprofit within your structure. It's so vitally important. Okay, so the first one is the business trust. So as I mentioned to you guys, right? You want to, if you are a business owner or entrepreneur, you do not want to have that business in your personal name. You do not want to be liable for that business. Anything can happen. And so you need to be able to protect yourself and that business and your income. Okay. So with this type of trust, right? You're going to go ahead and choose how you want to operate it. So you can either set it up as a holding company, which means that it's going to be non-operational. Okay. So if it's non-operational, that means that it doesn't offer any products or services to the society, okay, to the community. So you can choose it to be a holding company, which means that it's just going to own the business assets. Okay. So it's going to own the LLC. Okay. So, or the corporation, whatever type of legal business structure that you're operating, okay? And so you'll operate it that way, or you can operate it as a business. So if you don't have an LLC or a corporation, then you can set up a business trust and then you can run your business that way to where you are, it is operational. So you have products, you have services, things of that nature. Okay. So with the business trust, right, what happens is what we do is you have to go ahead and make the appropriate changes. Okay. So right now, if you're the owner of that LLC, you're going to do an amendment with the articles of organization. You're going to remove yourself as the authorized member. You're going to add the business trust as the authorized member. And then you're going to process that amendment so that now on the Secretary of State, it's going to actually be updated and it's going to reflect that a trust owns that property or an entity, excuse me, that an entity owns that asset, that an entity owns that business. Okay. So now when it comes to the business trust, what happens is if you have money that is being generated in the LLC, that money can then be distributed to the business trust because the business trust is the owner of the company. Okay. And so let's just say that this is $100,000. So that 100,000 can then be transferred to the business trust. And now the business trust is has to file taxes. So the business trust is a for-profit entity. It files what we call the form a 1041. Okay, so you as an individual, you are going to file a 1040, and so the trust files a 1041. Okay, the beautiful thing that I love about this type of entity is that you spend the money first and you're taxed on the leftovers. Okay, that is one of the most beautiful things with this type of entity. So with that being said, what happens is you're going to spend the money first. Now, what money are we actually spending? Well, we are going to be spending money on what we call operation expenses or OPEX, okay? So what does it cost in order for you to operate the trust? So let's just say it costs $30,000 a year for you to operate the trust, right? And so that could be, administration, management, all those other fees. So out of the 100,000, you're going to do a tax deduction of 30,000, and then you're going to have $70,000 that's left. So you're going to have to pay taxes on the $70,000. Or what you can do, which is one of my favorite things about the trust, is in order for you not to pay taxes on the 70,000, you're going to have to distribute. Okay. So you'll distribute that 70,000 to the beneficiary. And then now, because you issued a distribution inside of the trust, the that liability, that tax liability for the 70,000 goes straight to the beneficiary. So out of the 100,000 that came in, you had a tax deduction for the 30,000 and you did a distribution for the 70,000, which means that your tax liability is zero. Okay. So what we do is we are automatically going to make the family trust the beneficiary of the business trust. The reason we do that is because we're entrepreneurs and business owners, and we need to be able to take care of our family with the income that we're generating from the business. And so that is how we'll be able to do that. So the 70,000 that that is inside of the business trust, we're going to distribute it to the family trust. And so now the family trust is going to receive that 70,000 as income and has to pay taxes on the 70,000. Why? Because the business trust is not going to pay taxes on the 70,000. Okay. So now we're at the family trust level. Okay. Now that we're at the family trust level, this is where you're going to list your children as the beneficiaries. Okay. So whoever your next of kin is, they're going to be the beneficiaries. So what does it cost or what does it look like in order for you to run your family? Right. So you could have mortgage, utilities, car note, gasoline, children's tuition, life insurance policies, things like that. Whatever it is that you have, whatever expenses that the family trust generates for administration, operation, and management. Okay. So let's just say that in order to run the family trust, it costs about 60,000. So 70,000 came in as income from the business trust. And now we did a tax deduction of 60,000. And so now we have 10,000 left that we have as a tax liability that we have to pay taxes on. Okay. So we can normally go ahead and pay taxes on the 10,000. Another strategy that we can use is we can process a contribution. So a contribution is a charitable contribution where you can go ahead and donate that money to a charity of your choice, and that is actually considered 100% tax deductible. So what we do is we are also going to place a nonprofit within our structure as well, so that we can actually execute the charitable contributions. So we're going to do a charitable contribution of 10,000 from the family trust into the tax exempt nonprofit trust. The tax exempt nonprofit trust is going to receive it as a donation, right? And so with this type of trust, the thing that I love about it is that it is able to receive what we call donations and tithes, and it's 100% tax deductible with on a federal level with the IRS, and you do not have to apply for tax exemption as you would normally do through a 501(c)(3). So it is automatically exempt from having to file to file for tax exempt status with the IRS, and that is due to the separation between church and state. So as long as this trust is designated as either a church or a faith-based organization or some type of a charity or ministry, then or a school, then you are automatically exempt from having to file for exemption. Okay. So with that being said, with this type of entity, right? Everything that's coming in, it has to be labeled as either a donation or a tithe. And if you are generating income, then anything over 5,000, you do have to pay taxes on. Okay. So one thing that I love about this type of trust is that one, you obviously don't have to file taxes with it as long as you are not labeling what's coming in as income. Okay, documentation is very important. Okay. And so you want to be able to use this trust for whatever type of charity that you want to run or for your philanthropic endeavors, right? A lot of us, we have missions, right? We want to help the homeless, we want to help elderly, veterans, things of that nature. And so this is the type of entity that you want to use for that purpose, okay? So you're able to issue out donation receipts. You are able to get nonprofit grants. You're able to, operate it in that type of capacity, okay? One other thing that I want to mention is that if you have W-2 income, then the IRS will allow you to donate up to 60% of your income to this type of organization. Okay, so just keep that in mind because if you have W-2 income and let's just say that you're generating, 100,000 a year, then they'll let you write off 60,000 of that 100,000. And so then you'll be taxed on 40,000 versus 100,000. So just keep that in mind, okay? So it's very important to not only have a for-profit, but also to have a nonprofit, okay? So the next pillar is credit. So you want to put yourself in a position to where you are using OPM, right? OPM is other people's money, specifically the bank's money. Okay. So that's vitally important. So, one thing that I need you to know is that a trust can actually build credit, just like how an LLC or a corporation can build credit. Okay. So, with that being said, you want to be able to leverage a second credit profile, so specifically a trust, in order for you to get higher lines of credit, okay? So on the personal side, you might get, 10,000, 20,000, but on the business side, you can get 100,000, 200,000, okay? So keep that in mind because this is going to allow you to put your trust estate in a position to where it can sustain itself, okay? So you want to be able to leverage the bank's money because at the end of the day, the banks are leveraging you, okay? Because when your money goes direct deposit into the bank, what are they doing with it, right? They are leveraging it, right? They're also using OPM and they are going and lending that money out, right? For anything, right? For credit cards, for home loans, school loans, right? Student loans, vehicle loans, anything like that, any lines of credit. And so the banks are getting rich off of OPM. So you need to do what the banks do, right? So if the banks are doing it, then you also need to, rinse and repeat and do the same strategy that they're doing. So you need to borrow the money from them, so credit cards, lines of credit, loans, so that you're able to leverage those funds as well, okay? And I'll talk about that. So now let's move on to the next one, which is invest, right? So these are two vitally important assets that you definitely want to incorporate within your wealth building formula. So the first one is index universal life insurance policies. So life insurance is supposed to be used when you are living, but a lot of people think that life insurance is used when they're dead. So that is the biggest misconception that I see out here in society. So you want to be able to leverage the living benefits that come with life insurance, right? So one, the money that you have inside of your life insurance is fully protected. So if you was to end up in a lawsuit, they're not going to come and dip into the money that you have inside of your life insurance policy, which is good. Then the money that you are accumulating inside of your life insurance policy is tax free. Okay. So that means that you do not have to pay taxes on that money, which is a good thing. You want to be able to park your money into these tax free vehicles that are approved by the government and the IRS. Okay. The next thing is that your life is insured. Okay. So that means that if anything happens to you and you're no longer living, there is a death benefit associated with. That death benefit is what's going to be paid out to your beneficiaries. Okay. Whoever you list as your beneficiaries. So let's just say your death benefit is $1 million, right? So then your beneficiary is going to get the $1 million, right? And then the next thing is that this type of policy builds cash value. Okay. So um, every time that you pay your premium, what happens is a certain percentage goes to the carrier for the cost of insurance. Okay. So let's just say that your premium is $100. $20 is going to go to the insurance carrier for the cost of insurance. And then $80 is going to go to your cash value. So that is an account within your policy where you're going to accumulate cash value, cash that you are paying in when you are paying your premiums. Okay. And so now you get to not only accumulate cash inside of your cash value, but with this type of policy, not all policies, but with this one, you are going to earn compound interest. So That means that that the money that you're accumulating is then going to be able to compound over time. And the way that that happens is through the stock market. So with this type of policy, right, it's called an IUL, which is Index Universal Life. Okay. And so the word index is actually referring to the stock market, and it's specifically referring to an indice. So there's many different indices in the stock market. So you have the Dow Jones, you have the Nasdaq, you have the S&P 500. The S&P 500 stands for Standard and Poor's 500, which is actually tracking the top 500 companies in this country, the United States. Okay. And so with this type of indice, what happens is whatever that indice is doing, so let's just say the S&P 500 is doing 9%, right? 9%. So what happens is the insurance carrier, your money, your cash value is not directly invested into the stock market. So what they're going to do is they're going to mirror the stock market. So if the S&P 500 is doing 9%, then they're going to say, okay, well, we're going to match the 9%. And so we're going to give you a 9% interest on your cash value. Okay. So now your cash value just earned 9%. And so that is going to start to compound, and it's going to compound and grow and grow and grow and grow and grow into what we call like a snowball. Right. And so that is the type of position that you want to put yourself in. So now when it comes to the trust is going to be the owner of your life insurance policy. You are going to be the insured. The trust is going to pay the premiums of your life insurance policy, and the trust is going to be the beneficiary. So if anything happens to you, then guess what? That $2 million death benefit is going to go straight into the trust fund. Okay. And so this is the type of position that you want to put yourself in, because it is going to put yourself in a position to where you're going to be able to preserve the wealth. And we'll talk about that in just a moment, okay? So now, the next thing I wanted to talk about is real estate, right? So real estate is near and dear to my heart. I absolutely love real estate. That is the first company that I ever created. I still have it to this day, my real estate investment company that I created 10 years ago. Okay. And it is just it's so dear to me because like I come from very humble beginnings where me and my family, we were squatters. We were living in abandoned buildings. And so to now be able to have a portfolio of seven figures in real estate is just very it's a blessing. So I want to tell you that you guys can put yourself in a position to where you are able to acquire real estate zero down. That's what I did in the very beginning, and that's what I do, until this day. And so you don't have to use any of your own money in order to acquire real estate, right? Um, that first property that I bought it for $89,000, and I flipped it and I sold it for $235,000. And when I realized that I can make six figures off of one house, I knew that I wasn't going to be in nursing for a long time. So I gave myself a deadline and I said, okay, I'm going to only be in my career for 10 years. And I was actually able to walk away from my career in 8 years because of real estate. So when it comes to real estate, what you want to do is you want the trust to be able to sustain itself. And when it comes to the trust, right? The trust can have a mortgage. It can take out a mortgage. The trust can take out a home equity line of credit, right? The trust can own real estate directly. Okay. So that's how powerful your trust is. Now, you're not going to create a trust so that you can pour in your W-2 money into the trust. That's not what you're doing, right? That's not going to lead you to building wealth. You need to be able to have the trust sustain itself. The way that it's going to sustain itself is one, by building its own credit, two, by it leveraging its own credit, and three, by parking it into places like life insurance and real estate. So let's just say that you decide to build business credit with the trust, right? And so now you have a business credit card, it has $50,000, right? And so now you decide, hey, I want to go ahead and buy a duplex. So you go ahead and purchase a duplex. And so the way that you do that is one, you're going to get a mortgage. So one mortgage that you might want to look into is a DSCR. So a DSCR is debt service coverage ratio loan, where they'll give you up to 80% of whatever the purchase price is for that piece of real estate. And that real estate usually is, it's non-owner occupied, so it's for investment purposes only, okay? Now, they're going to give you 80%, so you have to go ahead and find the other 20, okay? And so the way that you're going to find that 20% is through the credit, right? It's through the credit cards. So remember, you have a credit card with 50,000. So what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and liquidate that credit card, right? And so now that you liquidated the credit card, you have that 50,000 that you're going to be able to use. But before you decide to use that 50,000, you're going to funnel it into your life insurance policy. So you have to always be able to put yourself in a position to where you're paying yourself first before you go ahead and park that money somewhere else. Okay. So you're going to go ahead and put it inside of the policy. And when you funnel it into the policy, your cash value is going to go up by 50,000, right? And so now what you're going to do is you're going to request a loan from your life insurance policy. And so the beautiful thing that I love about the IULs and even the whole life policies is that with that policy, right, this is a liquid asset. So that means that that money, right, is liquid and you're able to use it. So because it's an asset, what the carrier does is they're able to go ahead and look inside of your cash value when you request a loan, and they're able to see, okay, yeah, John has 50,000 in here, so we can lend him 50,000, right? Or 49,000, right? Because they're not going to lend you 100%. So they'll probably lend you like 95 to 98% of what you have in your cash value, right? So you put in this loan request and you are requesting whatever the maximum is. So they said, hey, yeah, we can give you 49,000. Right. And so now they're going to issue you a loan for 49,000, and it's going to go direct deposit into your bank account. Okay. Now this money is originating from the life insurance carrier's reserves. So that means that the money is coming from their bank account. The money is not coming from your cash value. So the 50,000 that you put inside of your life insurance policy is still sitting inside of your life insurance policy, still sitting inside of your cash value, earning compound interest, okay? Which is exactly what you want, because you want to be able to park your money into places where it's growing, right? So that money that you have just deployed, right? It needs to be able to work for you. So that means that that money, that dollar needs to go out. It needs to bring back friends. It needs to bring back 25 cents, 50 cents, 75 cents. Okay. And so that's what it's doing, because you've parked it inside of the life insurance policy that is earning compound interest. Okay. So remember, you need this money for your down payment. So now you put in the loan request, they approved it. The next day they wire you or do an ACH deposit for $49,000 into your bank account. So now you're able to go to the closing table with your DSCR loan that's going to put up 80%, and then you have the other 20% down payment for your real estate. You just acquired real estate, with 100% of the money, which means you just put zero down, right? And so that's the type of position that you want to put yourself in when you are acquiring real estate, because now you just acquired a piece of property for the trust, okay? And so now the trust owns this property. And so now this is a duplex, right? And so you're renting each side for, let's just say $2,000, right? So now this property is an income producing property that's making $4,000 of cash flow every single month, right? And so what you're going to do now is whenever it's the first of the month and you're collecting this rent, the first thing that you're going to do before you even go to pay anything, once you receive that rental income of the $4,000, you're going to funnel it into your index universal life insurance policy. So you're going to put yourself in a position once again to pay yourself first, okay? So that money is going to go straight into the life insurance policy. You're going to borrow it back out. So let's just say you borrow out, 3,900, 3,800, whatever it is, and then you're going to pay back the credit card, the mortgage, and whatever is left over is going to be held inside of the trust fund, okay? And so then you're going to just rinse and repeat. You're going to do it a second time, a third time, and a fourth time, and that's where you're able to build up your portfolio and build true generational wealth that's actually going to last the second and third generation. So now let's talk about how to actually transfer wealth, because a lot of us, we've never even asked ourselves that question. So what you need to do is you need to put yourself in a position to where you own nothing but control everything, right? That is so important. And I'm just going to repeat myself and I'm going to say it again. You need to put yourself in a position to where you own nothing but control everything. That is what stewardship is, right? Stewardship is where you're not the owner of these assets, but you are a good steward of the assets to make sure that they are well maintained, they're conserved, and they're growing, right? And so that is what you want. But right now, you're operating in what we call ownership, right? And so ownership is where you have bought into society's lie, where you have to be the proud owner of the house. You have to be the proud owner of the car. You have to be the proud owner of the bank account, right? Which is not the way. That is definitely not the way, because remember, if we don't wake up tomorrow, guess what? That house is still going to be there. So you have to understand that what you want is not ownership, but what you want is control. You want to be able to control that house or that property or that land while you're living. And so you're able to obtain that when you have a trust, because the trust actually owns the property and you are the controller of the trust, which means you control that property. That is what you want, right? You want to operate in stewardship, okay? So now let's talk about how to actually transfer wealth, right? So let's just say that you have got your affairs in order and you decided to actually set up the trust, right? So now that you have the trust, the way that you actually transfer the wealth is through what we call trust certificate units, which are TCUs, okay? So with these TCUs, they're just like stock certificates. So you know how stock certificates are going to represent ownership in a corporation. So trust certificate units represent beneficial interest in a trust, okay? And so because it represents beneficial interest in a trust, that is going to represent ultimately what is going to be transferred to you once the trust expires. So the trust has a length of time of when it exists. So typically we will have it exist for 100 years, and then at that time we'll decide if it's advantageous enough for the organization to continue for an additional 100 years. So if that's the case, then it will continue on. So now, with this trust organization, right, what happens is it automatically establishes 100 trust certificate units that are going to be dispersed to the beneficiaries. So let's just say that I'm one of your beneficiary and you gave me, 30 TCUs. That means that I have 30% of beneficial interest in the trust. So let's just say that the trust is worth $1 million. That means that my beneficial interest is equivalent to $300,000. Okay. So that is how you want to actually transfer wealth when you are ready to, ready to do so, right? But it's very important to have that established now, right? Sooner versus later, because a lot of us we think that tomorrow's promise when it really isn't. So, the next thing is preservation, right? A lot of us we don't even think how, like all this money that I'm making, right? The millions of dollars or whatever it is that you're making, right? Or your company, your business, right? How are you going to actually preserve it? And so a lot of us, we don't even think that far either, right? And you need to also put yourself in a position to where you have the tools for preservation. So what are the tools for preservation, right? Well, there's two tools. The first one is a trust. The second one is the life insurance policies that I mentioned. Okay. You need both of those tools. How many times have we seen it to where athletes and celebrities and famous families where they blow all of their wealth in their lifetime, right? They got a contract for $1 million, $100 million, right? $100 million, and they blow it in their lifetime, or it doesn't even reach the second generation. Why? Right? Because they don't have the right tools in place. Okay. And so if you're actually intentional about building generational wealth, right, then you need to be able to have these tools. Okay. So as we mentioned, you're going to set up that trust estate and you're going to have the life insurance policies. Okay. So remember, we said that the trust is going to be the owner of the policy. The trust is going to be the payer of the premium. You are going to be the insured, and the trust is going to be the beneficiary. So the trust automatically insures all of its assets. Okay. So the trust has a house, it has homeowners insurance. The trust has a car, it has automobile insurance. The trust has cash money in the bank account, there's FDIC insurance. So the trust has human assets, which are you, as the trustee and the beneficiaries. So the trust needs to insure you and the beneficiaries and the future beneficiaries. Okay. It's vitally important. Why? Because if anything happens to you, the trust is experiencing a loss. The trust is absolutely devastated and experiencing a major loss. So if the trust is experiencing a major loss, the trust needs to be compensated for that loss. So if the trust is going to be compensated for that loss, that means that that death benefit of that life insurance policy is going to go straight to the trust fund. So if your life was insured for $3 million and you transition tomorrow, that $3 million is going straight into the trust, and the trust is replenished with $3 million, right? Which is why, as I mentioned, you are a human asset. Your children that are beneficiaries are human assets. The future beneficiaries, which are what we call trust fund babies, are babies that are born into the trust organization. They are also human assets. So every single time that a baby is born into the trust organization, that trust fund baby is going to receive a policy. Okay. So the trustee is going to take out a policy on that trust fund baby. So hopefully it's an index universal life insurance policy, because there's going to be a lot of compound interest that is going to be earned throughout the years. Okay. So let's just say that this baby that's 30 days old that just got a life insurance policy grows up, right? They're 18 years old now. What do they need? They're going away to college. They need an apartment. They need a car. They need student loans, all this stuff, right? They need money. So they can easily go down to the dealership and they can pull their credit and they can get into a very high interest automobile loan, right? Paying $1,000 a month for a $30,000 car. Or instead of going down that whole process, because they are a beneficiary of a trust, also known as a trust fund baby, they can go to the trust. So if they go to the trust, they're going to request a loan from the trust, right? So one beautiful thing about the trust is that trustees and beneficiaries can request loans. They can take loans from the trust and they can give loans to the trust, okay? So this trust fund baby just requested a loan for $30,000 so that they can go buy their car cash. So now that we know that they're going to go ahead and buy their car cash, what happens is the trustee is actually going to issue out that check after all of the checks and balances have happened. They issue the check to the beneficiary, they go get the car cash. And now instead of them paying the dealership $1,000, they're going to pay the trust $300 a month. So now the trust is receiving, some money, probably a small amount of interest. And this is a win-win situation for both parties. But let's just say that the trust fund baby decides a year into the future, hey, I don't want to pay the trust anymore. So now they default on that loan. Well, first and foremost, they're never going to receive a loan from the trust organization anymore until they get out of default. But let's just say that they remain in default. Then what happens is it actually becomes a risk-free loan. Why? Because the money did not originate from the trust fund. The money originated from that trust fund baby, that beneficiary's life insurance policy. Remember, we can take loans out of that life insurance policy. So as soon as that trust fund baby requested a loan from the trust, what happened is the trustee went to the life insurance company, requested a loan for $30,000. They saw that there was more than enough inside of the cash value, and they did a direct deposit and sent that money straight into the trust fund. And that trustee issued out a check for the 30,000 straight to the beneficiary. Okay. And so because that money originated from the life insurance policy under the trust fund baby, that is a risk-free loan because that money doesn't need to be paid back. Those loans that originate from the life insurance company never need to be paid back. Why? Because, and it's optional if you want to pay it back or not, but it's not required. Why? Because that money is automatically going to be deducted from the death benefit. So this trust fund baby has a death benefit of $5 million, which means that if they default on the 30,000 and they never pay the trust back, that's completely fine because once that trust fund baby expires, once they transition, that $5 million minus the $30,000 loan is going to go straight into the trust, okay? And the trust is going to be replenished with $4.7 million, okay? I mean, no, $4.9 million, right? So that is what preservation looks like. That is what conservation looks like. That is something that is so vitally important for your distribution system. That is what you're doing. You are creating a distribution system. And once again, you have to have the tools in place, okay? So these are the books that I recommend. I recommend What Would the Rockefellers Do? That's a really good book that teaches you about the connection between trust and life insurance. I recommend what the Art of Passing the Buck, Volume 1 and 2. It teaches you about trusteeship. It's a really good book. I recommend Family Wealth. It teaches you how to actually run your family like a business. Okay, that is what all of us need to be doing. Okay, you are the CEO of your family. Your spouse is the CFO of your family. So that is how you need to be running your organization. And then the last one is the Complete Book of Trust, which teaches you about the different types of trust. Remember at the beginning of the call, I told you guys that there are hundreds of different types of trust. So you just need to do your research and find out the best type of trust for you and your family, okay? So, this distribution system is going to be your new form of doing business and your new form of actually creating profit, right? Creating profit, creating income producing assets, creating a legacy is super important, right? And so this can actually solve a lot of the problems that you have right now, especially dealing with asset protection and even saving on taxes. Okay. So it's important for you to be able to take it serious. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the call, right? You want to be able to do your research, do your due diligence, make sure that a trust is for you. But I will definitely tell you that everyone on the call needs a trust. You need to create your estate because at the end of the day, you're going to have one anyways. You're either going to do it now while you're alive or you're going to wait until you're dead for the state to do it for you. Okay. You want to treat this like a big business. You want to treat this like a Google, like a Facebook, like an Amazon, like a Tesla, right? Don't treat this like some little small mom and pop shop because this is not what that is. Remember, you're creating a distribution system. You are creating generational wealth now. You're creating a legacy now. You got to be able to do it right. This is the foundation. So let me show you a quick video of someone who took action on the information that I provided tonight.
Well, kudos to you all. Again, Christina, it's been a wonderful experience. I've been looking at your videos on YouTube for a while, and there are a number of people offering trust these days, and I guess that's the big thing. Uh, don't own anything, control everything. That kind of, I didn't say it correctly, but that is the sentiment. And so it seems like the playing field is being leveled now from the rich and people who weren't privy to this information. So thank you for being such a great asset to a community that didn't have this information. And you made it so simple. Thank you for the recordings. Thank you for the step-by-step instructions, things that we can go back and look at. So we do appreciate you. And thank you, Mondo. That was a great explanation of infinite banking. I know a number of people are talking about that, but they make it so complex. And his presentation was nice and succinct and very informative. So this has been an overall great experience. I definitely will recommend you to others.
All right, guys. So I do have a program teaching you step by step on how to create this distribution system. So we have 3 offers here. You just have to choose the best one that fits you and your family. So the first option is do it yourself, where you are able to do it independently through our online course. Okay. So with our course, it comes with 43 video modules, and it comes with the trust templates. The trust templates are the 3 trusts that I mentioned earlier, which is the business trust, the family trust, and the tax exempt nonprofit charitable trust. Okay. So, with that, the way that the course is designed is, and I'll show you what it looks like in just a moment. But the way that it is designed is for you to watch the video trainings, which I am very thorough. So you see my face, you hear my voice, and I'm very thorough. I go step by step. And so you're going to watch the video trainings, you're going to download the templates. So I break down every single paragraph of the trust so that you can understand the contents of the trust. So you do have lifetime access to the course, and you are going to be provided with resources as well as ebooks. So as far as the ebooks, the books that I mentioned earlier in the previous slides, you do get those books in an electronic version. And then as far as the resources, we give you every single resource that you need in order to effectively and efficiently operate a trust. So for example, if you need the tax documents, we provide them. If you need to be able to have board meetings for your trust, we provide them. If you need to be able to open a bank account for your trust, we provide them. If you need a quick claim deed to transfer your property or real estate, we provide it for you, okay? We also have a private Facebook community where you're able to meet other like-minded individuals, and we have a Telegram chat where you can chat back and forth with the people in our community. So we have over 1,300 trustees in our community, and some of them are in your city and in your state. And so we highly, highly encourage that you begin to cultivate a family. That is exactly what we have here. Is we have a circle of people that are like-minded, that are doing the same exact things that you're doing, which is protecting their assets and operating in trusteeship. Okay, so the course is only $997. The second option is done with you, where we do it on Zoom, and it's via a workshop. Okay, so our workshop is going to be held live next week, Monday through Friday from 11 in the morning to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay, so we're going to meet together 5 days next week. Okay, Monday through Friday. So you do get 5 Zoom calls. It is in a group setting. Usually it's 3 hours a day. Sometimes we might go a little bit over, just depending on Q&A. Okay, so this is the way that it works. So on Monday, we are going to focus on the business trust. So I provide you guys with the templates, and then I show you step by step how to fill it out, and I break down every single paragraph. So for example, the business trust is 52 pages. So I break down every single paragraph so that you can understand the trust, okay? You are not going to be able to operate a trust if you don't know what's inside of the trust. It's so powerful for you to be able to know the contents of the trust so that you can operate it to the highest capacity possible, right? This is the most powerful entity in the world. So you need to be able to know how to operate it, okay? And you're not going to know how to operate it if you don't even know what's inside of it. So after we break down what's inside of the business trust, then in those 50 something pages, um then we're going to dive into Q&A, you guys, okay? So just like how we're on Zoom right now, we're going to dive right into Q&A. So I'll answer any and all questions that you guys might have. On Tuesday, we're going to focus on the family trust. So with the family trust, once again, we're going to break down every single paragraph of the trust so that you guys can understand the contents of the trust. And then after that, we're going to dive into Q&A. On Wednesday, we're going to focus on the charitable trust. And so once again, we're going to break down every single paragraph of that trust. And then I'm going to show you guys how to become ordained ministers if you want to operate as a ministry. And then we'll dive into Q&A. On Wednesday, I'm going to show you how to get your EINs for your trust. So I'll show you what that process looks like by obtaining your EINs with the IRS. And then we'll go through banking procedures. So I'll give you a list of banks. I will go step by step through banking operations, show you how to have a board meeting so that you'll be ready to go with opening up your trust fund account. And then our educator is going to come in and teach you guys about business credit and business funding. And then on Friday, which is the last day, we're going to focus on asset protection. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take an inventory of your assets. And then after that, we're going to focus on transferring real estate. So I show you step by step how to redeed the property and how to record it with the county recorder's office so that you properly place that real estate into the trust and legally transfer it. And then we'll focus on vehicles so that you guys know how to transfer the title of your vehicles through the DMV. And then we'll focus on the businesses. A lot of you guys are entrepreneurs. And so we'll show you guys how to, one, do a business purchase agreement so that you are able to remove yourself for liability purposes. And then the second thing is for you to do the amendments with the Secretary of State so that you can remove yourself as the authorized member and you can add the business trust as the authorized member for those type of entities. And then after that, the last thing is one of our educators is going to come in and teach you guys about infinite banking. So teach you step by step about the life insurance policies and how to use this vehicle in order to build wealth with it. Okay. So that's going to be the workshop next week. As I mentioned, it is Monday through Friday from 11 to 2 Eastern Standard Time. So you do get lifetime access to it, which means that every single time that we have a workshop, typically is every 4 weeks. But our workshop after next week is going to be December 1st to the 5th. And then we start back up in January, okay? So with that being said, you get access to every single workshop that we've ever had and that we will ever have. So the workshops are recorded. So you're going to have access to the last 2 years worth of workshop recordings and then all of the workshops that are live, okay? So you want to be able to, one, not only ensure that your trust is set up the right way, but also for us to be able to hold you accountable, because that's exactly what we do. And so being in the workshop is actually um, a very good experience because in those Q&A sessions, right, remember, it's done in a group. So you're going to be getting to meet people that are like-minded. And so they're asking really good questions that you did not know that you wanted to know. So you want to be in that space. So the workshop is only $2,500. And then the last option is done for you. So done for you is where me and my team will go ahead and set up your trust for you. We'll go ahead and apply for your EINs and we'll transfer all of your assets. So you get individualized support, you get one-on-one assistance with me and my team, and we get to actually customize your structure and your trust. So the private sessions are $7,500. So with that being said, all you have to do is go to our website. So it is www.wealthytrustee.com. So on there, you'll be able to see the enroll button and you'll be able to enroll. So I'll show you what the course looks like. I'll also show you what a trust template looks like so that you can get a better understanding. And for those of you guys that are on the call, what I'm going to do for the next 24 hours is me and my team, we were talking yesterday and we said that we should start activating the Black Friday sale since we're already in November. So we are going to be giving 50% off. So it's only going to be for the next 24 hours, and then the next time will be on Black Friday. So for the next 24 hours, you guys can enjoy 50% off using the discount code TRUST50. Okay. And you'll be able to see that inside of the chat with the website. So if you have any questions, you can text the number that you see, 305-749-9215, or wherever or the number that you actually received in order to get an invitation to this webinar. You can send us an email and then you can visit us on social media. So what I want to do now is I want to be able to show you guys what the actual course looks like, and then I want to show you what a trust looks like, and then we'll dive into Q&A. So this is what the actual course looks like once you gain access to it. So as I mentioned, you have 43 video modules. All of these are your video modules. So you'll start off with the ones that say trust entity after the introduction. So you learn what a trust is, you learn the different parties that are involved, like the grantor, trustee, beneficiary, successors, protectors, about the different types of trust and the benefits. Then you learn about the faith-based organization ministry trust and how to set it up. Then you learn about the family trust and how to set it up. You learn about the business trust and how to set it up. Then you learn about different tax strategies, how to operate exempt with certain types of trust, and what distributable net income is. Then you learn about asset protection. So you're going to take an inventory of your assets first before you go to transfer any assets into your trust, okay? So we show you how to create a bank account, brokerage account, how to transfer the house, the car, the insurance policies, the businesses, how to have board meetings, okay? And then we go into wealth creation where we teach you about how to build business credit, how to invest those trust funds into the stock market, and how to practice infinite banking, which is you actually having a private money system with your life insurance policies. Then we get into Legacy Crest, and then you have all your resources and your ebooks. So this is the course that you get access to. So if you do the course or the workshop or even done for you, you still get access to the program. You still get access to the resources, ebooks, Facebook community, and Telegram chat. And then this is just one of our templates that I wanted to show you guys, and everything that you see in red is what you are going to be customizing for your organization. So as I mentioned, I break down every single paragraph of the trust organization so that you guys can understand the contents of the trust, which is so vitally important. So with that being said, we are all done for tonight. So I want to go ahead and answer any questions that you guys might have. Does anybody have any questions based off of the information that I provided you guys with tonight? Tosh, you have a question?
Yes, I wanted to know, um, I I'm a beneficiary of a trust, and I spoke to the lawyer who made up the trust, And he said that for everything to be transferred over, I have to file an affidavit of death of a trustee. Um, and I wasn't sure about that because the price is very hefty. So I was like, can I do it myself? I found the paperwork myself, but I know there's some other steps that I have to do, but it just seems like very expensive for.
Oh, okay. All right. So that's a very unique question. We can talk about that offline, but I will tell you that because you're the beneficiary and not the trustee, you're not able to decide what happens to those assets. So that's why they're advising you that you have to execute that affidavit because that's the trustee that's supposed to do that. So if the trust doesn't have a trustee, then the trust is in a very unique situation, which is why it's so important for you to list the successor, because you never want the trust to be in a position to where there is no trustee. So that's the position that you're in, and unfortunately. All right. All right. Well, thank you for asking that good question. Um, does anyone else have any questions that I might be able to answer? I'll look into the chat really quick. And I also wanted to mention that next month we are going to Ghana, you guys. So if anyone is interested in going to Ghana with us, we're going on a tour. And then we are also going to be in a conference. So we're going to be attending a conference. So if you guys want more information, go ahead and click the link that's inside of the chat. And the last thing I wanted to mention was that if you guys are interested in the program and you want to be able to reserve the 50% off discount, but you're not able to enroll immediately, then what you can do is you can place a deposit and then that will keep your spot for the 50% discount. So we do have a deposit link inside of the chat. So if you're able to execute at the deposit, then you can roll right into a payment plan. We do have payment plan options available. So you can roll right into a payment plan. And then once you have been paid in full, then you're able to get access to the program. All right, let me see. So somebody said for the faith base, would the 508 work with any trust? Um, I'm not really understanding what the question is. So the faith-based organization is the 508c1a. So the trust indenture is very specific, and that trust has to be designated as a 508, and it has to have the right things inside of the trust constitution. So you can't just call any trust a 508. Any other last questions? Should we transfer a single LLC into the trust or can we do multiple? That's a really good question. You can have multiple LLCs in one business trust. What I will tell you to do is you want to separate it between high liability and low liability. So your high liability LLCs will go into a totally separate business trust from your low liability LLCs. Um, the next one is, does this work for authors with book royalties? Yes, you can place your book into the trust, and then the trust will be able to receive those royalties and your beneficiaries. All right, you guys. So we are all done for tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you guys. Our next webinar is going to be next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you know anyone who needs to know this information, please go ahead and share that information with them so that they can also put themselves in a position to where they can build their legacy. We do have a replay. The replay is available on our YouTube channel. So you can go ahead and visit 7 Ways to Wealth on YouTube, and we have a lot of free content on there that is just so vitally important if you want to be able to do your research and know if this is the next best steps for you and your family. So the last thing I want to tell you guys is just to take action on the information that I provided you guys with tonight, because it could be it could change the trajectory of your family, right? You have to understand that right now, like your children, they're not going to be able to inherit your 9 to 5, right? And so you want to be able to secure their legacy. You want them to be able to receive their inheritance. And so now you're going to be raising them as not only beneficiaries, but you're going to be training them as trustees, because one day they're going to be your successor and they're going to take over. So go ahead and start building that legacy now. It's so important because we don't want the next generation to lose what we worked so hard for. So thank you guys. You guys have a good night, and hopefully I will see you guys in the workshop next week because we're going to hit the ground running, okay? If you have any questions, you can call us and text us and we'll be able to assist you with your enrollment. All right, bye everyone.